Hello, Jacksonites, and happy 67th birthday to none other than Godzilla. Celebrating this occasion, I'm back with Super Kaiju Binge, and I'm back into the Godzilla franchise. To the real part of the franchise that I've been wanting to get to the very most, honestly. Because now we've gotten into the 70s and the 70s era of Godzilla. This is arguably either my second favorite era of Godzilla, or it just might be my favorite. Sure, my favorite Godzilla movie is in the Millennium series, but I honestly think the 70s era of Godzilla is the one that's just the most consistently good, at least to me. 4 out of these 5 70s Godzilla movies I consider to be some of my favorites. The one that's not so much, you can guess what it is, but bear with me, is a bad film, but it's a fun bad film. So even then, I just kind of throw it in as this era where Godzilla is the kind of Godzilla that I like him to be. So this, of course, being Godzilla versus Hedorah from 1971. This movie was a lot of firsts for the franchise. Well, for one thing, it was the first Godzilla movie in 2 years. The first proper Godzilla movie, though, in probably 3 years. It was the first time that there was a Godzilla movie where its special effects were not done by Eiji Tsuburaya. More on that later. It was the first Godzilla movie to not be directed by Ishiro Honda he did Destroy All Monsters. Oh, and he did do Godzilla's Revenge. But at this point, Ishiro Honda had said, I'm done with Toho. It was also the first and only time that director Yoshimitsu Banno ever got to work on a Godzilla movie. More on that later. And this also, of course, was the very first Godzilla movie where Godzilla is straight up a superhero, not an anti-hero or a villain. He'd been an anti-hero ever since Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, but in this movie, he goes full-on superhero mode. Also, hope you guys like my new lighting scheme. I got one of those light rings, and I just have yet till now to crack it out and use it, but thus far, I think I dig it. Just don't fall. So yes, indeed, and this is the kind of Godzilla that I prefer. I don't mind it necessarily when Godzilla is a villain. And of course, there are really good Godzilla movies where Godzilla is an anti-hero, like I guess he could be kind of a King of the Monsters, or he could be an anti-hero in King of the Monsters. But I do prefer Godzilla, honestly, most as a hero. That's just what I prefer because I like Godzilla fighting off other monsters to protect the world. That's just what I dig. And I know that there's quite a lot of people out there, unfortunately, that really don't dig that. They like Godzilla as a villain, or they like Godzilla as an anti-hero. Again, I like me some anti-hero Godzilla, but I just prefer Godzilla best. And of course, I'm wearing a shirt for the occasion. I just prefer Godzilla as a hero. That's just my taste. So yes, indeed. I also realized last few videos I've been slacking with the shades and bringing out the movie. So yes, indeed. Today I will be discussing the much maligned Godzilla versus Hedorah, aka in the States as Godzilla versus the Smog Monster, which honestly I've always hated that title. It sounds like a Roger Corman movie. Yes, indeed. Godzilla versus Hedorah. Okay, so this movie Indeed, is much maligned. Godzilla vs. Hedorah is a very contentious installment in the Godzilla fan base. There are those that absolutely despise this movie, that despise the living shit out of this film. Say it's one of the worst Godzilla movies ever made. I've even heard some, according to Brendan Tenold, some people even consider this to be one of the worst movies of all time. What? And then there are others on the other side of the coin who consider this to be an underrated gem and one of the most underrated and underappreciated Godzilla movies. And I definitely fall into that camp. I've always, honestly, since day one, really enjoyed this movie. And now, as I've said, I consider Godzilla vs. Hedorah to be one of my favorite Godzilla movies. Not to say that it's perfect, it's not. But even then, I really do dig Godzilla vs. Hedorah. I think it's one of the most underappreciated Godzilla movies of the entire franchise. Its production is certainly interesting. There's not a whole lot to say about that, but so following the colossal failure that was Godzilla's Revenge and the kind of like lukewarm reception that Space Amoeba got, which, by the way, after that, Space Amoeba would be the last non-Godzilla Toho Kaiju film until Orochi the Eight-Headed Dragon 24 years later. Sadly. Not counting War in Space. That's not a Kaiju film. And it was also, of course, at this time when Japan was going through just a mass... They were going through quite a bit of shit at the time. Yes, I did. Also, ironically, celebrating this occasion, Toho just released a short film on their official Godzilla YouTube channel about the Final Wars Godzilla fighting against the Final Wars Hedorah, and as like a big tribute to. Oh, and I just realized 2021 is this movie's 50th anniversary. Hallelujah! Maybe that was the occasion. Yeah, they made a short film of Godzilla versus Hedorah with the Final Wars designs. It was pretty awesome. And so anyway, yeah, at the time, Japan was going through a bit of shit. One, which was timely, being a pollution crisis, which I'll get onto that later. And then also there was the rise of popularity of various kaiju and tokusatsu TV shows. This year, we would have the original Kamen Rider show. We had, well, we'll get more to that. Well, I've already talked about that. We had Ninja Squadron Gatchaman. We had the beginning of the original Mazinger Z anime. We had, no, that was next year, but soon we would have the original Devilman anime. We would also see the return of Ultraman with Ultraman Jack in 1971. And from here on out, up until 1975, ironically, we'd have a subsequent Ultraman show for every year. So right now, Japan was really focused on TV, and the film industry was taking a massive blow, and a lot of studios were scrambling, trying to figure out what to do in order to save themselves. One of them being rival studio Dai couldn't cut the mustard and, of course, fell under the surface. And Toho was kind of scrambling around left and right trying to figure out what to do to keep themselves afloat. And one thing that they decided to do, they decided to bring back Godzilla and just kind of use him as a moneymaker, which did work for a few years. Godzilla vs. Hedorah was made under extreme duress. Yoshimitsu Banno initially conceived the idea for Godzilla vs. Hedorah after seeing cities like Yokkaichi being covered in black smog and the ocean being filled with foam from dumped detergent, and formulated the story of some kind of monster transforming and mutating as a result of all this massive pollution. The film marked director Banno's directorial debut However, the budget for Godzilla vs. Hedorah was much, much lower than previous Godzilla movies. And due to this, Yoshimitsu Banno was given only 35 days to shoot the film, with only one crew being able to shoot both drama and monster scenes. During production of this film, two things happened. Kenpachiro Satsuma, who played Hedorah in this film, ended up actually coming down with appendicitis, and due to the weight and mass of the Hedorah suit, they just ended up doing the appendectomy while he was in the Hedorah costume. It was also during this when Satsuma found out that painkillers have absolutely no effect on him. And it was also during this production that producer Tomoyuki Tanaka suffered a heart attack on set. He didn't die, of course, but he was laid out in the hospital for a while. And he ended up seeing the rough cut of Godzilla vs. Hedorah and reportedly absolutely hated it. He called in Ishiro Honda to come take a look at it and offer some advice as to how to fix the film. But even then, Tomoyuki Tanaka was not happy with the film and ended up kind of ruining Yoshimitsu Banno's career after that, unfortunately. Fucking asshole. I've said this before. I have lost some respect for Tomoyuki Tanaka. I can understand that he wasn't really in the right mindset at the time. He was nuts with stress over Toho changing in ways that he didn't like, and he was literally recovering from having a heart attack. But still, the way he treated Yoshimitsu Banno, I find to be pretty despicable and extremely unappreciative and ungrateful. So, yeah, I don't really hold Tomoyuki Tanaka in as high regard as I used to. I think during this, he was just a massive dick. After this movie came out, which apparently was a pretty big success, earning 300 million yen in Japanese box office, and also apparently it was a really big hit overseas in America, it being released in 1972 by AIP as a double feature with the American film The Death Master under the Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster title. Despite this, Yoshimitsu Banno wanted to make a sequel to this movie multiple times, but it was scrapped due to Tomoyuki Tanaka reportedly hating this movie. The next film was going to be called Godzilla vs. Red Moon, but this was scrapped and later became Daigoro vs. Goliath, which I've never ever seen, though it looks fucking ridiculous. And then they planned a new film called Godzilla vs. the Space Monsters Earth Defense Directive. Just rolls right off your tongue. But this was also scrapped and then became The Return of King Ghidorah, which this was also scrapped, to which they ultimately ended up making Godzilla vs. Gigan. More on that when I get to Godzilla vs. Gigan. So this movie kind of did have a bit of a messy production. No pun intended, because this movie is about a messy monster battle. And that is certainly part of the reason why this movie is much maligned. It's a very well, it is a conventional Godzilla movie, but at the same time, this movie's weird. I think that is part of this film's charm, but it definitely is very strange. And I will agree that some people have labeled this as Some have labeled it as a straight-up reboot. I don't think that's true. I do think all 15 Showa Godzilla movies share the same... well, you can make your arguments for Godzilla's Revenge, but they all share the same continuity. Like, there definitely is a progression, kind of like the Showa Gamera movies. But I definitely would say that this is more like a soft reboot for the Showa Godzilla movies. Gone is the experimental stuff with the last few Godzilla movies, and now we're just going full on. It's just a monster movie versus a monster movie. That's all that we're doing, and this is what we're going to be doing for a while. And in my opinion, that's for the better, because that's the kind of stuff that I like. So my personal history with Godzilla versus Hedorah is fairly straightforward. I was, of course, uh, gleefully enjoying. Ah! Hi, Simon. Startled me. Hi, bud. I was gleefully enjoying the days of Netflix when it first came out, when you could rent movies through mail, when it was still competing with Blockbuster. Um, and I saw the title Godzilla versus Hedorah, and it looked and sounded interesting, so I decided to check it out. And I rented it from Netflix, and it showed up when my mom picked me up from school one Friday afternoon. And I remember looking at the disc. It was the 50th anniversary TriStar DVD. So I saw Hedorah's face on the disc, and I was like, this looks really interesting. So I eagerly awaited getting home and watching this movie. So I put it in. Mom had bought me a bag of Cheetos Puffs, and I sat down and I ate the entire bag, and I watched Godzilla versus Hedorah. I dug it. I thought it was a pretty damn solid Godzilla movie. I enjoyed myself pretty thoroughly. And as the years have gone by, it's never really changed. It's just improved. It did escape me for a while, but then Kraken released Hedorah, Gigan, Return of Godzilla, and Ever a Horror of the Deep on DVD. This was the first one that this wasn't the first one I bought. I bought this and Gigan together off of Amazon, but this was the first one that I sat down to watch, and I just still remember. I remember still just digging the living fuck out of this. I got the DVD, not the Blu-ray. I just got the Blu-ray because I want to have it in case I need it, in case it goes out of print, which I think it has. But yeah, I rewatched this years later, and I dug the shit out of it. And I watched it 4 or 5 more times in the next couple of days. I really dug the shit out of this movie. And upon my most recent viewing, I still love it. I still consider it one of my favorite Godzilla movies. I see its problems. It's not a perfect film, but damn it, I love this movie to absolute death. So before we get into the plot, a word from our sponsor, of course. Okay. So, let us get into the plot of Godzilla vs. Hedorah, which is fairly straightforward. Simon, what are you doing? The microscopic alien life form Hedorah feeds on Earth's pollution and grows into a poisonous, acid-secreting sea monster. After he sinks an oil tanker and attacks Dr. Toru Yano, played by Akira Yamauchi, and his young son Ken Yano, scarring half of the doctor's face and scarring Ken's hand, Hedorah's toxic existence is revealed to the public. Ken Yano has visions of Godzilla fighting the world's pollution and insists Godzilla will come to humankind's aid against Hedorah. Hedorah metamorphoses into an amphibious form, allowing it to move on land and feed on additional sources of pollution. Hedorah, having emerged at a power station to consume pollutant gases from the smokestacks, look like he's taken a massive hit off a massive bong, is confronted by Godzilla. Hedorah is easily overpowered by Godzilla, and it retreats into the sea after a pretty messy and entertaining fight. During this fight, several pieces of its new body are flung around nearby, which then crawl back into the sea to grow anew and allow the monster to become even more powerful. It returns shortly thereafter in a flying saucer-like shape, then assuming its strongest form of all, its perfect form, which demonstrates some of the strongest powers it has access to yet. Thousands of people die in Hedorah's raids, and even Godzilla is unable to defend against Hedorah's poisonous emissions. As hope sinks, a party is thrown on Mount Fuji to celebrate one last day of life before Japan and then the rest of the world succumbs to Hedorah. Ken Yano, Yukiko Keiuchi, Miki Fujinomiya, and other partygoers realize that Godzilla and Hedorah have come to Mount Fuji as well for a decisive confrontation. In one of the longest end Godzilla fights in the entire franchise, during this battle, Godzilla fights valiantly against Hedorah, but is overpowered by the amorphous alien, losing an eye and having his hand burnt to the bone by Hedorah's acidic body tissues, which corrodes anything it comes into contact with. Finally, Godzilla is almost killed by Hedorah after Godzilla is hurled into a pit and is attempted to drown Godzilla in a deluge of chemical sludge/shit. Dr. Toru Yano and his wife Toshie Yano, or Toshi, has determined that drying out Hedorah's body may destroy the otherwise unkillable monster. While Godzilla and Hedorah fight, the JSDF swiftly construct two gigantic electrodes for this purpose, and attempted to fire them, giving Godzilla the chance to return to the fight. The electrodes then short out, the power being cut off by Godzilla and Hedorah's fight, but Godzilla reactivates and energizes the electrodes with his atomic heat ray, dehydrating Hedorah's outer body. Hedorah sheds its outer body and takes flight to escape, but in one of the most infamous scenes in Godzilla history, he propels himself through the air with his atomic heat ray and flies through the air to give chase. Godzilla drags Hedorah back to the electrodes and continues to dehydrate it until Hedorah is on the brink of defeat. Godzilla tears open Hedorah's dried out body and exposes it to the electrodes once again, dehydrating the pieces until nothing remains but dust. Godzilla then returns to the sea in a pretty, not very optimistic, like we fucked up type ending, but not before pausing to give the humans a stern gaze in one of my favorite Godzilla moments. Then, in one of the most annoying end credit songs to a Godzilla movie, Ken Yano bids goodbye to Godzilla, leading into the sequel that Yoshimitsu Banno desperately wanted to make, but asshole Tomoyuki Tanaka never gave him the chance to do. Hi, Simon. That's Simon. Simon. Boop. So how about this plot? Well, it is back to a much more conventional monster versus monster story type. You know, monster wreaks havoc, kills some people, causes some destruction. Then the other monster shows up, tries to fight him, gets defeated. Then other monster wreaks more havoc, which leads to an ultimate confrontation at the end of the movie, which ends in, of course, the antagonistic monster being defeated. It's a fairly straightforward monster story, and in my opinion, it's pretty damn well done. It's trippy, it's weird, it's well-paced, it's entertaining, the effects are great, the fights are great, and Hedorah and Godzilla are very entertaining monsters to watch. Hedorah even more so, because Hedorah, honestly, is one of my favorite Godzilla monsters. And I would honestly say this is the closest that the Godzilla franchise ever got to being somewhat like a horror movie. Because this movie has moments that are kind of gruesome and horrific for a Godzilla film. But more on that later. Overall, I love this movie's story. It's a shame that Yoshimitsu Banno got cut off at the knees because of asshole Tomoyuki Tanaka, because if he was able to make a sequel to this movie, I think it would have been pretty damn awesome. Simon! What you doing? So what are my pros for Godzilla versus Hedorah? I have 10 pros for Godzilla versus Hedorah, so strap yourselves in. Pro number 1 is I like the human cast. They're nothing overly special, but they're likable. You do get attached to them emotionally. They're proactive in trying to fight back against Hedorah, and this being another Godzilla movie that has a child main character, he's the best of the entire franchise. We'll talk about Ken first. Ken being played by Hiroyuki Kawase, he's great. He's not annoying like what Ichiro. He's pretty quiet. He's pretty polite. He's pretty reserved. He comes off as being a slight geeky shut-in, but that's cool. He's a fan of Godzilla, and as I just noticed on my last rewatch, he's also an Ultraman fan because he has an Ultraman toy in like his little playground in his parents' backyard. So good on you, kid. He likes Godzilla, he likes Ultraman, but he also likes science because he takes after his dad and the fact that he himself does have some smarts. Like he's good with chemicals, and he's still a child at heart because everything has to be related to Godzilla. But he listens to his dad, and he even teaches some of the main characters about like the chemical makeup of a sample of what he calls hedrium that they pick up after Godzilla's first fight with Hedorah. Yeah, he's not annoying. He's not stupid. He's a pretty damn solid child actor. And speaking of which, Ken's dad, Toru, I like him too. He's not a condescending, know-it-all, boring, bland scientist. He's sympathetic because he loses half of his face to Hedorah burning it off, kind of looking like the main alien leader in Mechagodzilla 74. That's later in the franchise. Oof, ow. Yeah, Toru's a likable scientist. He's not condescending, he's not bland, he's not boring, he's not a know-it-all somehow. He comes off like a really good or not a marine biologist, but also he comes off as a good chemist. He also doesn't just speak in constant techno babble. He's aware that the people he surrounds himself with, except for Ken, but you know he's learning after his dad, they're also not scientists. So he speaks in everyday man terms, like that yellow substance you see there is sulfur. Like he doesn't dumb stuff down, but he makes things simple for everybody to understand. He doesn't just speak in techno babble the whole time. And even though his face is disfigured, he still tries to be proactive in the fight against Hedorah. So I actually think Toru is one of the most underrated Godzilla scientists. He's great. Side note too, this movie has a really good English dub, in my opinion. Nobody has an annoying voice. The dub cast does a really good job with their characters in this film. And the rest of the human cast, Ken's mom, she's a little overprotective. Like, oh, Ken, you're supposed to be in bed. Oh, Toru, you're supposed to be resting. You're not supposed to be working. Typical, concerned wife and mom, but she's likable. And the rest of the human cast, they're just serviceable. They're not too special. They're not annoying. They're not, well, I mean, you could say they're kind of stupid for wanting to go to Mount Fuji, but whatever. Overall, the human cast, I think, is pretty likable. Pro number 2 is the score for this movie. This was also the first Godzilla movie in a very long time. Well, I mean, Masaru Sato did 2 of them, and then I can't remember who did Revenge, but the first new person, aside from Revenge, since Akira Ifukube to score this film. This movie was scored by Richiro Manabe. He was a Japanese music composer who wrote scores for numerous science fiction, horror, and kaiju films drawing from jazz and dissonant modernism. His scores, particularly the ones he's most famous for in the 1970s, utilize electric guitar, pipe organ, the piccolo, and keyboard synthesizer stuff. I've heard him be compared as like a poor man's version of Masaru Sato. This would not be his last Godzilla movie, as I believe he did return for Godzilla vs. Megalon. That movie reuses, for some reason, a lot of music from this film. You never hear the classic Godzilla theme. This is all brand new music in this film. But I like it. I really dig it. There's one aspect of the music that I don't really care for, but more on that later. But I really like this music. It's strange, and that adds itself to the film's strange feel and tone, but it's catchy. Godzilla's main new theme, the it's goofy and ridiculous and silly, for lack of a better term. But I think it's catchy, and I think it's fitting. It's certainly like it feels heroic, and it builds Godzilla up to be a big giant superhero. And the rest of the music, like when the movie's trying to be creepy, it does work. When it's trying to be more experimental and strange, the music works. This isn't quite one of my favorite Godzilla scores, but the music overall, I think, is pretty damn solid. And it's kind of a shame that Richiro Manabe only did 2 Godzilla, like to my knowledge at least, only 2 Godzilla movies. So yeah, I like the movie's music. Pro number 3, 3 and 4 kind of have to do with each other. But pro number 3 is the creepy atmosphere to this movie. As I said, I think Godzilla vs. Hedorah is the closest that the Godzilla franchise ever came to being like a horror movie. There are those that debate on the original Godzilla movie being a horror film. We can certainly have our debates for that too, but this movie, in my opinion, comes off as more of a horror movie. And I may as well talk about pro number 4 as well. This movie's tone, I label it as gross, but in a good way. This movie's like pretty gritty and grungy and kind of gruesome and a little disturbing. And Hedorah himself is a really nasty, disgusting creature. And that adds to this movie's overall tone, in my opinion. It just feels more dirty and slimy and gross and disgusting. And that adds to the film's tone and atmosphere. It just kind of, you feel like you're choking. And it certainly does feel like, because Hedorah is a pretty damn significant threat, Hedorah is a very threatening monster. Toward the end of the movie, you just kind of feel like, God, how the hell are the human characters going to get out of this situation? And how the hell is Godzilla going to defeat this monster? But especially during the scenes at night, because how Hedorah moves and acts, he is a very creepy and disturbing creature. And because of how threatening and how many people he kills in this movie, that also lends itself to this movie being creepy and disturbing. So that's really well done. Not specifically talking about Hedorah just yet, but more on that later. But yeah, the atmosphere to this movie is overall very foreboding and kind of doomy, and just kind of creepy, and you feel like you're choking throughout the whole film. And toward the end, also, it feels a little hopeless. And yeah, the tone, it's really gross and nasty and disturbing, and a little bit, not overly disturbing, but a little bit. But most of all, yeah, it's pretty gruesome. Godzilla gets covered in shit, and he gets his flesh burned off. People are melted due to the acidic sludge. People suffocate, and their skin gets all nasty and rotten because of all the sulfuric acid mist. This movie, I think, has one of the biggest body counts that we see on screen from any monster in the entire Godzilla franchise. So, yeah. Pro number 5, I'll just talk about him right now. Hedorah. Hedorah is one of my favorite Godzilla monsters, and I consider him to be one of the most underrated and underappreciated Godzilla monsters of the entire franchise. And honestly, Mechagodzilla in all of his appearances has certainly given Godzilla a run for his money. King Ghidorah has given Godzilla a pretty good fight in most of his appearances. Destroya came close to defeating Godzilla, and Destroya is probably the most the closest comparison to Hedorah. Hedorah and Destroya are both monsters that have multiple forms, and they're both comprised of millions of microorganisms. But I would honestly say Hedorah gives Godzilla his most hellacious beating in the entire Godzilla franchise. Godzilla gets smothered in sludge more than once. He gets covered in sludge that burns away at his skin. He gets gassed by sulfuric mist 2 or 3 times throughout the course of this film. He loses one of his eyes to sulfuric sludge, and he gets all the skin on one of his hands burned off. So all you see is bone. Godzilla gets the living shit beaten out of him in this movie. But Godzilla also does put up a very good fight. Not talking about Godzilla quite yet, but Hedorah is certainly a very distinctive monster, in my opinion. Because in my opinion, he beats the shit out of Godzilla the most out of any Godzilla monster in the entire franchise. He certainly gives Godzilla the most grievous, or maybe not the most grievous, but the largest amount of injuries in one single fight. Multiple burns, losing an eye, and losing his hand. Well, the skin on his hand, but you see my point. And Hedorah himself, he's a very creepy monster. His appearance, the sounds he makes, what he does to people, melts them down the bone or burns their flesh. He eats all the pollution, but then he spews out this sulfuric mist that makes people choke and die. He fucks everything up in his path left and right. He eats cars. He eats pollution. He spews out sludge that melts metal and flesh. He pollutes the waters. He just fucks up everything in his path, literally. And he certainly is a very threatening and intimidating monster. He's got powers that give Godzilla a big run for his money. And he himself, just existing, causes rampant destruction. So Hedorah certainly is a very distinctive, threatening, and what's the word? Just fun, entertaining monster to watch. And I also do like his personality. At first, Hedorah doesn't have that much of a personality. He's just a mindless monster that just wants to eat and consume and just do what he does best. But over the course of the film, Hedorah develops a pretty sadistic and nasty personality. It's like a good foil to Godzilla. Godzilla's trying his very best to kick the shit out of Hedorah, but it just kind of seems like whatever Godzilla does, Hedorah's got some kind of foil for him. Starts throwing Hedorah around. He spits out sludge that burns Godzilla. Breathes his atomic breath all over him. He fires out a laser that burns off Godzilla's hand. No matter what Hedorah does, or no matter what Godzilla throws at Hedorah, Hedorah's got something to counter it, and it's pretty well done in my opinion. Hedorah is a pretty good match for Godzilla, and their fights are fun. More on that in a minute. And also the way he moves is really creepy. He kind of just slithers around, and he kind of seems like a creature that doesn't quite know how to move. So he's almost like a zombie. And over the course of the film, he is like learning more and more and more about how to exist and do what he does best and destroy the world and fight Godzilla. Um, and the sounds that he makes are certainly creepy and distinctive too. So overall, Hedorah is an awesome, awesome kaiju and is one of the most underappreciated Godzilla monsters of the whole franchise. I think Hedorah would be a very good monster to put in the MonsterVerse, in my opinion, at least. And the next pro number 6, I believe. Yeah, is Godzilla. Godzilla is awesome in this movie. This being the very first appearance of superhero Godzilla, and it's one of the best. Godzilla has a full-on 3D personality in this film. He has quite a bit of screen time, though granted, I will agree with something that Zazubar said. He kind of is just a big gun in this movie. He's just here to fight the monster. But it is called Godzilla versus Hedorah, and Godzilla fights Hedorah quite a bit in this movie, and he has a pretty serviceable amount of screen time. So I ain't complaining. But Godzilla's great. He's a total badass. He's just all gung-ho trying to save the world against Hedorah. He tries his damnedest to fight against Hedorah. He takes one hell of a beating, but in the end, he's able to prevail and defeat Hedorah. And I love his personality, too. He's fully 3D, having his own personality and his own sense of sentience. And he gives one of my favorite moments in the entire Godzilla franchise. At the very end, after he's fully defeated Hedorah, he turns around and through his scars and being covered in flesh and missing an eye, or being covered in burns and missing an eye, he turns around and just goes and gives the main characters a you fucked up look, and now I have to clean up your mess. It's great. And Haruo Nakajima gives a really, really solid performance as Godzilla in this film. Honestly, probably his most underrated performance, in my opinion. Yeah, Godzilla's great. If you came here for Godzilla, you get a great case of Godzilla in this movie, in my opinion. He's awesome. Pro number 7 is the nutty mindfuckery, as I call it. Okay, yes, this movie is strange. It's very, very strange. There's lots of 70s psychedelic shit that's in this movie. There's lots of drug references. So if you're a fan of Matango, you'll probably get a kick out of this movie. There's lots of drug references. It's very obvious it's in the 70s. Like, my God, is this screaming in 1971? A lot of the music is very nutty mindfuckery. The editing is very nutty mindfuckery. There's lots of bright colors, and the animated segments are weird and strange and distinctive and memorable. Some people may be put off by all the nutty mindfuckery in this film. I was too at first, but the more that I watched the movie, the more it just stuck out to me as a positive. So yeah, I actually really like this movie's nutty mindfuckery. It's enjoyable to me. It's weird, but it's enjoyable. Pro number 8 is the special effects. The special effects are pretty damn solid. The suitimation is very, very good. The Godzilla suit in this movie looks great. Hang on one sec. The various forms of Hedorah all look great. Though poor Kenpachiro Satsuma, the perfect form of Hedorah, that suit weighed 300 pounds. And the poor guy was just surely sweating himself to death inside of this suit. With all the hot studio lights and all the studio fires and all that. The perfect suit looks great. It's probably my favorite form of Hedorah. The 4-legged aquatic suit looks really good. All the props for the not the amphibious form looks great, but all the props for the aquatic forms of Hedorah when he's swimming around in the water all look great. You don't really see the strings. You don't see the wires. They all look really, really solid. All the underwater shots look great too. It's dry for wet, but it still looks great. Um, the lights inside of Hedorah's eyes look really good too. It's a very contrasting red against Hedorah's mostly green body. Um, and the suitimation on Hedorah is also really, really good too. Despite the fact the suit weighed 300 pounds, it did seem like Kenpachiro Satsuma could move around in it fairly well. The poor guy was just miserable inside that thing, I'm sure. Haruo Nakajima gives a really, really good performance as Godzilla, of course. The composite shots are a big improvement. There's some really good blue screen work. There's some good um, miniature sets. There's some great city sets, and the Mount Fuji set all looks really good and well detailed. Um, Overall, the and the optical effects look great too. The explosions look great. The electrode effects all look absolutely stunning. The lighting is great. The flashy red, blue, and green lights all look awesome. The special effects in this movie, I think, are pretty fucking awesome, in my opinion. See who did the effects? I don't think it was Sadamasa Arakawa. Oh shit! I don't know. I don't think it was Teryoshi Nakano. No, I think it was actually. Yeah, I believe it was Teryoshi Nakano. Actually, yeah. Um. What the hell? Oh, okay. Yep. Yeah, it was Teryoshi Nakano, and this was his first Godzilla movie where he was the main effects guy, and he gives a very strong first effort, in my opinion. All the effects in this movie are great, in my opinion. Pro number 9 is the Godzilla camaraderie, as I call it. I love it. This is one of very few occasions where Godzilla actively teams up with the humans to take down the monster. And for some reason, that always like really rung well with me, in my opinion. To me, I don't know why exactly, but I do like the concept of humans and Godzilla teaming up to take down other monsters. I like that concept. One big reason why I love Godzilla King of the Monsters. Which, speaking of which, the only other times I can think of off the top of my head, and I actually think these are the only other examples, is in Terror Mechagodzilla, Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, and Godzilla King of the Monsters are the only other examples, I believe, where Godzilla actively teams up with humans to defeat the antagonistic kaiju. Um, but I just always dug Godzilla teaming up with humans. It doesn't have to happen all the time, but special occasions, it certainly is warranted and is entertaining, at least to me. And the final pro number 10, is the monster battles. I love them. I notice they kind of do have Gamera versus Guiron syndrome, where there's lots of lingering takes, but at least there's interesting stuff happening on screen to warrant those lingering takes, at least for me. And for some reason, a lot of the Godzilla trying to just like say, go away, get out of here, go away, get out of here to Hedorah, I just found that to be really, really entertaining, and even more so goes for solidifying Godzilla's personality in this film. But when Hedorah and Godzilla actually do fight, it's very entertaining, and they beat the shit out of each other. Godzilla throws and slams Hedorah around all over the place multiple times, impales Hedorah on his hands, blasts the shit out of him with his atomic breath, whacks him a couple times with his tail, rolls around with him on the ground and beats the crap out of him. And as I've said, Hedorah just beats the living shit out of Godzilla, gasses him with sulfuric acid at least 3 times, burns off all the skin on one of his hands, burns out his eye, burns his flesh all over, shoots his other hand with his eye laser. Yeah, these monsters beat the crap out of each other. And I would definitely label Godzilla's final fight with Hedorah as one of my favorite monster battles of all time. It's quite long. It's like the last 25 minutes of the film. And this movie being an hour and 25 minutes long, you certainly get your money's worth for kaiju action. But also, I'll throw this in as another one too, is overall the monster action, like Godzilla setting fire to all the pollution in the ocean is fun. And Hedorah going on all his rampages all throughout the movie. It's good monster rampage stuff. So overall, yeah, the monster fights are great, and the monster action is entertaining as fuck. It's awesome. So with all these good things to say about this movie, do I have any cons? Oh yes. I have 4, but they're big ones. Con number 1 is that the editing in this movie is extremely inconsistent. Sometimes it's, it's good, it's well done, it's cohesive, and it's fine. Other times it's very sloppy. And this more so goes into all the scenes that are just weird and nutty and mindfuckery. Sometimes it's effective, but then other times there's shots that go by so quick and you have all this shit flashing up on screen. It's so hard to follow, and you're just sitting here like, what am I watching? And that's a sign of bad editing, as if it calls attention to itself. Again, sometimes it adds itself to the nutty mindfuckery, but other times it's distracting and it kind of gives you a headache. Con number 3, the one aspect of this movie's score that I don't like. This movie has a theme song called Save the Earth, and it plays constantly throughout this movie. It's so overused and it gets so old. It makes you want to pull the damn hair out of your head. We get it. All throughout the movie, you just hear Tyson, 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 Tyson. Maonie no Hanomaya no Tyson, 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 Tyson. Me no Hino Tyson. If I ever hear the words Tyson, I'm gonna pull my fucking scalp off of my skull. Holy shit, is it so overused? Damn, we get it. And it means save the earth. We get it. Save the earth. More on that in a minute, though. Con number 3, Hedorah's origin is kind of sloppy. There's 2 theories that are well, not really. One isn't a theory, but it like you can glean from the movie itself. The first one being that Hedorah was just spawned from all the pollution all over the world. And because of this movie's message, we'll get to that, you could have just left it at that, as that being hey, where'd this monster come from? Spawned in all the pollution. Oh, okay. Now you could ask, how does a creature spawn from that? But it's a monster movie, so who cares? You could just left it at that. Hedorah was born in all the polluted waters all over the world. That would have been fine. But then they throw out another theory that Hedorah is an alien that landed on Earth and started feeding off all the pollution. Now, I don't necessarily have a problem with Hedorah being an alien, because he certainly does have very extraterrestrial-like physical attributes, like the fact that he doesn't breathe in oxygen and he feeds on stuff that would otherwise be toxic to other life forms. My issue, though, is that A, they never really confirm it. It's just a theory. Um, but also B, it just seems kind of like overkill. Like the filmmakers couldn't make up their minds. Do we want this monster to be just spawned off the pollution all over the world, mixed in with surely some nuclear radiation that's been dumped into the waters? Or do we want to make this an alien? Like pick, guys. It's one or the other. Um Ultimately, though, it's not a huge problem and doesn't get in the way of the movie like with Godzilla versus Space Godzilla. Um, it's just a little annoying dealing like just listening to these theories, but then the movie never confirms them. Like it asks these questions, but it never provides any concrete answers. I more personally just go with the fact that even though yes, Hedorah works as an alien, but I just say he just was born from all the pollution. Screw it. But speaking of which, hands down, this movie's biggest problem is its forced ass environmental messages. So, unlike a lot of other Godzilla movies, this movie's allegory is actually it's like really subtle, and you have to really delve deep into this movie's subtext in order to truly understand what Yoshimitsu Ban was trying to say now. Oh my god, this is one of the this was not directed by Yoshimitsu Banno. This was directed by Captain Planet. My god, this is one of the biggest examples of how you don't handle a social commentary or subtext or allegory. Now, yes, it's technically a good allegory. It's good subtext and it's good social commentary. The problem is that it's shoved it down your throat, shoved up your ass, and they try to exfoliate it into all of your pores all over your body. Like they try to just fill you to the brim and beat you over your head with, hey guys, pollution's bad. Pollution is bad. Look at all this pollution. Look at all of this shit filling our waters and our oceans. Look at all of it. Look. Hey, dead fish, sick people, nasty waters, oil slicks. Hey guys, the world's being polluted. It's bad. Hey guys, it's being polluted. You see what I mean? That's what this movie does the entire time. I would say there's easily a 10 minutes to maybe 12 minutes worth of beauty shots of pollution in this film. It's maddening. At first, like the beginning of the movie, it's fine, but then all throughout the movie, they keep reusing the same shots of polluted waters, and it just gets so old. You just want to scream, guys, we get it. Pollution's bad. Pollution is bad. Can we get to the monster fights? Okay, guys, we get it. Can we get to the monster fights, please? Oh, damn. This is probably this movie's most infamous problem. Everybody who discusses this movie always has something to say about this movie. It's very, 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 very blatant. And I know why. Due to Japan's haste to recover from all the damage that it suffered during World War II, it ended up fucking themselves over because they ended up having a legit pollution crisis. And I believe it was around the late 60s when it started to get really bad. So I get that this was a timely issue, and this was Yoshimitsu Banno trying to just blatantly say, hey guys, pollution's bad. We need to fix this. But subtlety. And this movie does not carry that word whatsoever. Overall, though, with all that being said, I still love Godzilla versus Hedorah. I still consider it to be one of my favorite movies. It's got some problems, sure, and it is definitely an acquired taste. But if you like your stranger films, and you like your more unconventional, but also conventional monster movies, and also, of course, if you're a Godzilla fan, I highly recommend Godzilla versus Hedorah. It's one of my favorite Godzilla movies, and overall, one of my favorite kaiju films. So despite this movie's massive, massive problems, I actually will be giving Godzilla vs. Hedorah a perfect solid 10 out of 10. I love it to death. It's one of my favorites, and I could watch it 5 times in a row and never be bored. Except for the scene when the cat gets covered in sludge and when the baby is covered in sludge. Could have done without that. Yeah. With all that being said, post your comments down below and let me know what you think. Welcome back to Super Kaiju Binge. I've certainly missed doing this. And I've certainly missed doing Godzilla movies because lately I've been in a big Godzilla movie mood. So speaking of which, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go off and watch Kong Skull Island. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and share this video with your friends. Look forward to more episodes of Super Kaiju Binge. And as always, go out and don't pollute the earth. If you see a trash can or if you see a crushed Coke can on the ground, pick it up, put it in the garbage. And I will see you guys in the next video.